Well, welcome back for another episode of Rocks, Roots, and Ruts. I'm Chris Elmore, and this is a podcast focused on fitness, trail running, ultra running, and just balancing life. I'm 42 years old, and I've got a family, and I like to talk to people of all experiences that can try and help folks fit in fitness, inspire them, give them tips, all types of things. And today's guest, I'm excited to talk to Anthony Gilbert. He is 43 years old. He's from Tulsa, and he is very similar to me in the sense that he has a family and a career, and he's training for ultras, and he's run different distances. He's run 50Ks and 50 milers, and he's shooting for a 100 miler. So I'm excited to be able to share with you and get to share his story about things he's gone through. So that is what we're going to be doing today. But first, I'd like to say thank you to Head Sweats. I am a Head Sweats ambassador, which means I get to represent their brand. I have the honor of doing that, and I have always loved Head Sweats. I've been using them since 2006, way before I was ever an ambassador for Ironman. They make amazing hats and visors and beanies and headbands. So if you like that type of stuff, I highly recommend their gear. It is really, really, really nice. You can go to headsweats.com and you can use the code CJ25. CJ is CJAYE25, and you're going to get 25% off everything on their website. And like I said, it's the gear that you see me wearing all the time. It's the hat I have on now. I always say that they have magic hats that never show sweat lines. So check that out. You'll get 25% off. And enjoy the product. I'd also like to give a shout out to my Patreon supporters. They are the folks that are behind this, behind me, helping me continue to create better content and fund some of my equipment as I try and improve the quality and add more things like the podcast and continue to add more videos. Those Patreon supporters get access to a lot of my content early. So you get video releases early, you get extra inside kind of behind the scenes videos and pictures and things that I put together. So if you are interested in being a part of that, you can go to Patreon. That's patreon.com/CJ Media. And right there, you will be able to join a community that is growing of people that have kind of constant access to me. I got a question last night. Actually, folks just shoot it to me. Those types of questions. Trying to get back to anybody that sends me stuff, but the people with Patreon, they send me questions, and I try and give them my undivided attention to help them with whatever they're looking for. So thanks to those folks. I appreciate your support. But now let's hop on in to this episode with Anthony Gilbert. Out. Trail run. All right, well, we are live, and I have my guest Anthony Gilbert on with me, and I just want to say welcome, Anthony. Thanks for coming on this morning.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I met Anthony through one of my previous guests. You'll remember Family Fit Habit and Brandon, and he and you have connected online, apparently. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. Now you don't live near him. Where are you in? Are you in Oklahoma?
I am. I'm about 20 minutes south of Tulsa.
Okay. Yeah. So then we connected, and I've been watching you and all of the stuff you're doing, and you're kind of going through a lot of the same things I feel like I've been going through as far as training for your first 100 mile or, your first 100 mile completion at a race, and going through all the growing pains and things like that.
Yeah. It's funny how everybody starts to have kind of the same kind of issues, and that's why I guess that's probably what makes it really cool is everyone feels the same pains.
Yeah, over time, everyone at some point will have, it seems, they go through these lists of kind of growing pain injuries or issues, or they run into the same situation in a race or struggling with the same piece of gear. So it's really neat to be able to connect with folks. Now, let's start with a little bit as to set the stage as to where you're at, your age, and then a little bit about family, what you do, and then we'll work through kind of your running.
Sure. So I'm 43. I'll be 44 this summer. Been married. It'll be 20 years in July, and I've got 4
Congratulations.
kids. Thank you.
4 kids.
Pretty big milestone. So 4 kids. My oldest is my daughter, and she's 17. And then I have 3 boys that are 12, 9, and 4. So I've got my hands full.
Yeah, that's a full house.
Yeah.
Now, how old was your youngest?
4.
4. And your oldest was 17?
Yeah.
That's a good spread there.
Yeah, it is a good spread.
Yeah. How are those buying those diapers again?
Yeah. I was trying to get out of those. Probably the thing that we always, it's like after we got my second son, Aiden, out of diapers and everything, we kind of took a time off, and then, then the last one showed up and was like, man, here we go again. But it's like we had sold everything off, gotten rid of all the baby stuff, and that's kind of the bad thing. So
yeah, I mean, for me, mine are 2 years apart, so technology even changed just in those 2 years, right? As far as what was available for the cameras and things like that, right? The screen and the camera and the room and all that stuff. And in 2 years, it was totally different, right? Color screen, multiple cameras. And I can only imagine, going 17 years ago to today, when you look at, how different things are.
The technology is ridiculous. I'll sit there and, stuff on Facebook will pop up as memories. And, I used to have a handheld camera and, those types of things, and a little flip phone, and the recordings were so granular and just horrible. And then it's like, then you start looking at the stuff from this, the last 4 years, and it's like, wow, just totally makes a difference.
Yeah, leaps and bounds. Yeah, it's funny because who knows, 17 or 20 years from now, we may look at the HD videos we're shooting now and be like, look how grainy that is.
Exactly.
As we're watching them from our VR sets, and it'll be a whole different experience.
Exactly.
So now your youngest is 4. So that, I kind of said, for me, when my youngest turned 4, 5 is where it gave me, more flexibility, but she was able to get up, she could change her clothes, and, then it allowed me to do more training. It became easier on my wife because she wasn't waking my wife up. I could go out for a run, I'll come back, and she's sitting on the couch with her iPad, right? So that's a lot easier. Are you kind of getting to that stage now?
Well, I can relate to what you're saying, but I have unique challenges as it is. Most of my training I do in the evening.
Okay.
It's because I'm not usually a morning person. So I like my sleep. I like to sleep a little later than I should. I'm just a night owl naturally. And so I'll do a lot of my training after I get the boys in bed. And so most of the time during the week, it's usually a shorter run anyway. So I get them in bed. But if, like this week is spring break, they're not wanting to go to bed. They're like, it's spring break, I don't want to go to bed. We don't have school. And so then it starts cramping my training because they're up later. And so that means I'm not going to be able to get my run in like I want to, or I'm going to have to either take a rest day or take a shorter run or figure something else out. So if I do go for a long run on a Saturday or a Sunday, it's usually everyone's still asleep. And so it's good because, he sleeps pretty good. And when he wants to. But, if I'm going for a long run on a weekend, the house is out. So, and that gives me flexibility, but trying to get the boys in bed on a school night, I try to get them in bed by around 8:30 or so. And so then, I'll get out for my run around 9, sometimes 9:30. And so I can put in a good hour and a half before it's getting later.
Yeah, that is, it's like the exact opposite. But my wife tells me the same thing, that, as the kids get older, they're going to want to stay up later. So, I roll out of bed at 4 in the morning, and, it's all quiet. I have everything to myself. I can go train, and, they get up between 6 and 6:30. most days. They are starting to sleep a little later, going through phases. So although I don't mind them getting up early, because I really dread the days of trying to drag them out of bed to go to school when they're there to that point. But yeah, that's always the funny thing is at what point will I not be able to go to bed at 8:30, because it's like, okay, you have to go to bed so I can go to bed, or at what point will they be tucking me into bed and staying up late?
Yeah.
So you're going out. So you said you sleep in. So what time is it there? We're recording at 5 a.m. in California. So is it 7?
Yeah, it's 7.
All right. So are you usually up at this time?
Usually I'm on vacation today, but usually, at 7, I'm on the way out the door going to work.
All right. Now, what type of work do you do?
So I'm a project manager, business analyst for an oil company here in Tulsa.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I saw in your story you said you moved back to Tulsa after college. Is that when you were in Kansas and then you moved to Tulsa? Is that right?
Yeah, my dad worked for a gas company, so we moved. They talk about Army brats moving every couple of years, right? And so we moved about every 2 to 3 years. And so I grew up in Kansas and lived in Kansas and Nebraska, and then down into Houston, and then we moved up to Oklahoma. And then once I got done with college, I've been in Oklahoma ever since. I lived just outside of Oklahoma City for 12 years, and then got a job offer up here, and wasn't sure if I wanted to move back up to Tulsa, just because I've been comfortable where I was at. But it was the right opportunity, and Tulsa's got a great running community, and that's one of the things I had missed. With some of the urban wilderness type stuff that we have here in Tulsa. And so been here now 6 years now.
Oh, okay. It's more recent than I thought it was then. So as far as talk through a little bit of your running history, you basically been running since you were a toddler, it sounds like, getting on the track with your parents.
Yeah. So the story goes that my parents said I had lots of energy, which I don't deny that. I wouldn't mind having some of that extra energy nowadays, but
isn't it backwards?
But and sorry if my voice starts to go out. They would take me out to the track when they would go walking, and they said that I would run around the track. And usually, I guess there was an older gentleman that would run laps, and they said I would follow him, and I would keep up with him and run. So that's basically, I've been running since. Well, I guess you could say I've been running since birth almost, here and there. And then I really started getting into running. I mean, I've played sports my whole life. So I grew up playing baseball and soccer, basketball. Basketball was my first passion, just like, much like Brandon was. And that's one of the things that really kicked us off, is we got a lot of similarities in our lives.
Yeah, you said that you are in the email when we were exchanging. Did you say you're 6'4"?
6'7".
6'7". That's right. My brother-in-law is 6'7", and I believe that's how tall Darth Vader is. Actually, he's 6'7". So we always tease him. We were somewhere. I forget where we were. We were at some sort of tourist thing, like a ice cream factory or something. We were all together as family, and they had this lines on the wall, and they had famous people, and he's 6'7", and Darth Vader is 6'7", I guess, that's famous. So we always tease him that he's as tall as Darth Vader. But being 6'7", it's funny. I had just had a question a few shows ago when I was doing the live shows, and someone was asking about being a runner that's 6'7", and is that a disadvantage, being that tall? So I don't know very many really tall ultra runners. How do you feel that's affected you, or is it an advantage?
Well, let's just say, some people are like, man, your looks are deceiving. I can say that much, because people, with me being 6'7", I'm pretty big, height wise. I stay pretty naturally slender, but they don't think I'm moving very fast. And so when I catch up to them, they're like, wow, he's actually moving pretty fast for his size. I will say that I probably don't stride out as much as I would like to, but, my strides, usually equal 2 or 3 strides of, a shorter runner. Yeah, there's advantages and there's just disadvantages. Of course, the advantages being tall, you're going to have like I said, you're going to have a longer stride. Probably one of the disadvantages of being ultra tall as an ultra runner, your body takes more of a beating. I would say probably gravity starts to mess with you a little bit, because if you fall on the trails, naturally you're going to fall a lot further.
Yeah, exactly.
A little closer to the ground. And so I'm like a tree in the forest. When it gets cut down, it's going to fall and it's going to have some momentum behind it. So fortunately, I've not really suffered any major injuries falling, but I can tell you it does not feel very good. A fall is a fall, but when you're coming from a little higher up, I can only imagine. But no, I'd say that's being tall as a runner, honestly, I don't think it has any more advantage. Everyone's got advantages and disadvantages. Shorter runners can go quicker and cut in and out of things. But, being a bigger runner, especially like when you have a big group at say a marathon or something, you can kind of push your way through and you can see where everybody, it reminds me of when I ran the Oklahoma City Marathon for my first marathon. It was kind of a little intimidating, but I could see where the starters were at, and I could just see the waves of runners once they sounded the gun. And it was pretty cool to watch, but, I have a perspective to be able to see from up above a lot of other people, but then it's like I can almost see too much rather than those that are kind of, tucked further down, can't see where the start is at. So you just kind of, roll with it. But, I wouldn't say it's too much of an advantage or disadvantage versus someone, shorter. Everyone's got, things. Being taller, you've got times where you have back issues and things like that. But I've not really ever noticed anything too much being a tall runner.
Yeah. Well, then, my brother-in-law, who's that tall, has issues getting shoes. I think he's like a size 17 foot. So, we want to go and do cross-country skiing. He's got to buy custom-made cross-country ski shoes or, things like that. I mean, he really doesn't even need snowshoes practically when we go out. But so do you have issues with shoes at all, or?
Thankfully, I do not, Chris. For as being as big as I am, you'd be surprised. I only wear a size 13, so I have small feet for someone my size. And so, yeah, there's some challenges of going out and finding size 13, but I've normally been able, that's pretty much 13 is getting close to the cutoff where you're going to have to go get something specialized. But
most of the time you can probably find 13s in the store.
Yeah.
They might be out of stock more, but at least it's a commonly carried size.
It's pretty common, and they don't normally, now selection might be limited. If I wanted, a different color or, a different model, I might have to order it online. But for the most part, 13s, they're either going to have them or they're not going to have them. So,
right. Yeah, exactly. So, well, that's good. So then you ran through high school and then into college. Is that right?
Yep. So I mainly ran in high school. I did cross country and track and field, and kind of cross country was my way of getting ramped up condition wise for basketball. And, instead of just, doing short sprints and stuff like that for basketball, I had some long endurance and things like that with cross country. And since basketball was my first, passion per se, that's kind of what I pushed through for high school. But with cross country, I enjoyed it because of running in the non-traditional type settings, golf courses and hidden trails and things like that. And that brings the adventure side out of things to where you're running and you can the dirty runners like to grab tree branches and let them swing back and hit somebody as you're running, right? So I've done that a few times. I've had that done to me a few times. But I played basketball all 4 years through high school. And honestly, it got to where I felt like basketball was becoming more of a job rather than a passion or a love. it got to where I had some ankle injuries. And so that caused me some issues. And so I was like, maybe I need to do something that's a little less physical. Now, of course, running can be very physical, as we both know, but not necessarily as physical as basketball would beat on me. And I kind of got burned out with my coach. And so that kind of led me back to where I was like, I'd rather be running than playing basketball all the time. So, and you can run anywhere. Basketball, you have to have a basket and a ball. And so running naturally was something, it's like you can go and run anywhere you want to. And so it was at the state track meet my senior year where I was recruited to go collegiate. It was a junior college in Kansas, but I signed a letter of intent to go run cross country, indoor track and field. And so that's where I made the separation and transition from being a basketball player basically into being a runner.
Okay. Yeah. So then you got out of college and I think you said, did you take some breaks in there after school?
Yeah.
And then eventually you attempted your first marathon, or you did your first marathon.
Yep.
What year was that?
That was 2013. I had, for the most part, the running that I would do after college, we ran 8Ks mostly, and, a few 5Ks. And I ran my first half marathon my freshman year in college. And it's still to this day is my PR, which it's kind of frustrating that the first time out, I go out and I knock out a PR and I haven't been able to hit it since. I ran a 1:38 for my half marathon. And I know that's not incredibly fast, but for me, I felt like that's pretty fast.
It's quick for me.
So I mainly ran, 5Ks and things like that that were just, not real competitive. I would just go out and I would run it. And then I took a couple years off of just, I would still run, but it was that, hey, I'm going to feel like going for a run today and just put the shoes on and go for a couple miles. And that was it. It wasn't like I was following a training plan or anything like that. And then I started having some IT band issues. And at the time, I didn't have the knowledge that I do now of what IT bands are. I just figured it was some kind of runner's knee and I just needed to take a break. I'd get in about 3 miles into my run and my knee was just screaming at me, you need to stop. And it's like, as soon as I stopped running, it stopped hurting. And I'm like, I don't get it. And so I was dealing with IT band issue. And so I took some time off and tried to figure out what was going on with my knee. I never went to the doctor. I'm stubborn and just let it, basically after about 6 to 8 weeks, it pretty much healed up. And then I didn't have any more issues. In November of 2012, it's a boneheaded thing, but we had an attic in our garage. And so I went up into the attic to get some stuff. And I was coming down out of the attic and I was about probably 2.5 feet up off the ground. And I've done it numerous times. I'd ran a 15K the day before, so my feet were a little fatigued, and I hopped off of the ladder, just to basically just jump down. Yep. And when I did that, my right foot, which is my bad ankle, I didn't land. I pretty much landed with all my weight on that ankle, and when I landed, it completely gave way, and let's just say that, kind of like your life flashes before your eyes. It's like all my training and everything, everything flashed before my eyes. And it was just that instant, that pain that shot through my entire body. And I screamed out. And of course, my family's in the other part of the house and they hear me slam into the washer and the dryer.
Everybody comes running.
They're hearing me scream and they're trying to figure out what's going on. And so I'm laying there, and it's like the first thing I said is, my training, I'm done. And because
priorities,
you suffered enough injuries in your ankle, that feeling, and you're going to be sidelined for a good long while. And so that was in November of 2012, and I'd been training for my marathon. And so I went to the doctor, and he put me in a walking cast, basically. He saw some damage in my ankle that he wasn't sure if it was current or if it was from all the ankle injuries I had from basketball, and said, we'll give it some time and see how you're doing in a couple weeks. And then if things don't progress the way we want them to, then we'll talk other options. I wore that walking boot for about 6 weeks. It was driving me crazy, and I wanted to get back to running, but I knew I had to take my time.
So it was all soft tissue. It wasn't any sort of fracture or anything?
No, I probably would have been better off breaking it, but it was a 3rd degree sprain, or 3rd degree. I don't know I'm not a doctor, so I don't know all the terminology, but it was basically a partial tear of the ligament in my ankle. And so it was 3rd degree. So it was, I basically almost completely tore my ligament. And so that was pretty severe. And that's what I've been dealing with recently. It's flared back up. And so it's like it doesn't want to go away. But I remember it was the 1st of January. I was like, it's a new year. This is my resolution. I'm going to go out and I'm going to start running again. I'm being stubborn and hard headed. And I put a good brace on it. I still have that brace that I've been wearing lately, and wrapped it up and went out to see if I could run. I just wanted to see how it would feel. And it wasn't the most enjoyable run I've ever had, but it felt good enough to where I was able to put pressure on it and I was able to walk on it. So I was like, I'm going to give it a good test. And went out and it was fine. And so from January until April, I ramped up my training and went out and completed my first marathon in April of 2013.
Nice. Congratulations. Yeah, I can speak to ankle injuries. It was, my daughter was only 6 months old, my first daughter, and we took a trip to Aspen with a bunch of family, and we were going to be there 8 days. We had like 5-day ski passes and all of this stuff. We get there, we had a condo right across from ski resort, and I go walking in my running shoes. At that time, it was like Ultra, the flat, running road shoes. So they're super slick on the bottom. And we go walking across carrying all of our stuff, and I hit black ice and rolled my ankle immediately. Never even made it to the snow. We were maybe 5 feet from the snow, and went down and tore 7 spots in my ankle. And it was so painful. And when they got me up and basically carried me, I got my arms around their shoulders back to the condo, go to the urgent care emergency room there, and he basically said, yeah, you'd been better off breaking your ankle than tearing all these ligaments. So I can totally feel your pain there, because it took forever to heal. It's one of those things that, that it just didn't feel like it got better, and you go through all of the stiffness and the rehab, and you just, it's even mental, just feeling, whether it's better or not, you still are always kind of scared that, it's going to flare back up, like you said. Absolutely.
I don't know how many times, Chris, that, it's like playing basketball. You're going to expect when you're going to get, you got some possible, opportunities when you could get hurt, going out for a rebound or whatever. But running, it's like I did it a couple weeks ago, just walking across the street, stepping off the curb, and it had been a little icy, so I avoided some of the ice, and it's just the way I stepped caused me to tweak an ankle. And it's like, it can be flat surfaces, and I just stepped a certain way and it flares up. And so, and especially when you start dealing with, reoccurring of the same ankle.
Yeah, exactly.
It's frustrating mentally. It's like, I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if it, you start saying, am I going to be out for a long time? And your mind starts messing with you. And I'm like, I'm stronger mentally than that. I'm just going to go out, and then I just have to put my mental side, just tell yourself to be quiet. I'm going to go out and I'm going to test it, and go out and see if it will actually do what it's, I know that physically I probably could do it, but it's the mental side that you got to get past a lot of times, just to, you want to err on the side of caution, but you also want to not be, sidelined forever.
Yeah. Well, ankle injuries are one of the reasons, I never played basketball competitively, but I kind of took it up after college when I was working. A bunch of guys at work would go to the gym and play basketball. So recreationally, I'd go and play. And it got to the point where pretty soon I've got ankle braces on both ankles, trying to stop from rolling ankles. And it's at that point I was probably in my mid-20s, but I even recognized, you know what? I can't take these ankle injuries. It's just too easy in basketball to roll your ankles. So yeah, my basketball recreation was pretty short-lived because I just, as much as I enjoyed it, I felt like I was constantly dealing with tweaking my ankle.
Yep.
So now you did your first marathon. You said, I believe in your email, you talked about you kind of were done with marathons or.
Yeah. It's one of those things. It's like some people, there's people that don't even have any desire to run a marathon. And, I worked with a guy, he was a pretty competitive runner, and he's like, you ought to go out for a marathon. I was like, I don't know. The half marathon had been pretty much, the race that I really liked. And I was like, that's just too long to be running. That's a long ways. And it's funny I say that because, they say never, because I said, I'm not going to run a marathon. And he's like, well, push yourself and see. So I go out and I run it. And, pretty much the training that I'd done, after that injury, I'd only been more or less doing a half marathon training plan. So I go out and run my first marathon on half marathon training. And still to this day, that first marathon is a PR.
Okay.
So it's like, okay, well, I was like, and so then I get done with that marathon and Chris, I was in such pain. It hurt to walk to my car. I sat in my car and it was about an hour drive home. I got out of the car. I could have crawled, but I guess you would say I waddled into the house, laid on my bed for the next day or so. I couldn't get out of bed. I hurt in every spot I couldn't even imagine. And I got to work, 2 days later, and I said, I'm not running another marathon. There's no way. I'm done with that. That's ridiculous. He said,
one and done.
He goes, you have to run another one. I was like, why? And he's like, to make sure that the first one wasn't a fluke. And I'm like, no, there's no fluke there. I did it.
Exactly.
I honestly, I went through every, I laughed when I heard people say that they went through every emotional possible running a race. I was like, there's no way. Yeah, there is. I loved running when we started and I hated it in the middle, and I was, excited and I was mad and I was, just ready to get it over with. And I got done and I was like, I'm done. I'm not running another marathon. I will not run another one. I am done. And I hung it up for about, I think probably about 2 months. I was like, I had no desire to run, and I was just ready to just do whatever. And 2 months goes by and I put the shoes back on and I start training again. And I had no desire to run a marathon, but I was like, I'm going to keep running. And I got that desire to start training again and just ran. I pretty much after that would run 5 and 10Ks. And then I moved to Tulsa and things changed. I got, I guess it's a good influence, or you could say they were bad influences, depending on how you look at it. But I started getting around some of the people that I know in the running community, and they started enticing me to run further distances and training for longer races. And I think to date, I've now ran 14 marathons or greater since then. So never say never, because it's led to more. And then, of course, that's led to even further.
Yeah. Now, with all this running, we didn't really talk about your wife at all. How is she? Is she like it? Supportive? My wife puts up with whatever I do. She's very supportive of it, but she certainly isn't interested in doing it. She's done a half marathon, and it's just not her thing.
Yeah, she's not a runner. She is supportive. She wants to be able to run, but she's had some knee issues. But she's still trying to get up to where she would like to be able to run a 5K. Mm-hmm. She's accepted it. It's one of those things. It's not really her thing. She doesn't like when it takes away a lot of time from the family, which I understand that, and I don't like it either. She'll support me. But she doesn't like me running the longer distances. Like, I can tell you that much, because she's always hearing stuff about runners, that have had health issues. And she's like, I need you, and I don't want something to happen to you. And so she has that love and concern as a wife. that she doesn't want something to happen to me, which I respect and I completely understand that. But she puts up with it. She, she thinks I'm half crazy, as do most other people. But she's good with it as long as it doesn't interfere too much with family time.
Yeah, that's always the balance, is trying to get in enough training and enough working out that you feel you've done the work, but also putting in the family time and making sure, obviously you want to be there as much as you can, but making sure they feel that you're there as much as you should be. And my wife, that's another concern. You hit the nail on the head. My wife is always concerned about, okay, you're 42 years old. In 15 years, when you aren't working and we can travel the world, are you going to be able to walk all over Paris, walk the stairs at wherever we're at, and be capable? When we're finally there, am I going to be the one that doesn't want to leave the couch because my body's broken down?
Yeah. And, going through kind of the stuff that I've been going through recently, especially after some of the longer races, when you're kind of hobbling around. She was telling one of the kids the other day, she's like, I hate to see that your dad can't even hardly walk. And he's hobbling around, he's laid up. She doesn't like that because then I'm useless.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a big baby. I'm not getting up and doing anything. And so then she's having to pull, my weight too. And so then that's where it gets frustrating. And she's like, you got to take care of your body, and, you got to listen. She starts coaching me. She's like, you need to listen to your body, and, you got to listen to what's going on. I'm like, yes, I know. I get that. And so, I listen to my body, but she's like, you always listen to everybody else, but you don't want to listen to what I'm saying, and what I'm saying is important. And I said, well, it's not that I don't want to listen to what you have to say. It's because I know that you're right.
Yeah, and, exactly.
We've got this joke. We've got a pair of coffee mugs. It says, Mr. Right and Mrs. Always Right. And that's pretty much how it is I might be right, but she's always right.
Yeah, exactly.
So you got to listen to her. So, and I completely understand her concern. Just for longevity purposes, that, like you said, 15 years from now, am I going to be able to, move around and take care of myself and not be, hampered by, a long-term injury?
Yep. Yeah. That's always, she always says, people work out to be healthy. You take it to extremes and work out to actually not be healthy. It's like the exact opposite of what you should be doing.
Exactly.
I will say though, it's funny, doing the Ironman and things like that, where I've run, those are really the only marathons I've run, right? I did my Catalina 50K, and that race especially, and then the 62 I did last weekend. One thing I found, and that I'm going to do from here on out, is I walked a ton afterwards. In the past, I would get done with a race and plop down, right? Most of the time, you drive home, you spend the day relaxing, but I didn't do that at this the 62 miler. And then when I was in Catalina, naturally, the house is really far away from where I was staying, and I walked around the town, and I felt great, and my recovery was so much quicker, where I thought for sure I would be laid up after the 62 miles for a good week. And really, walking, I swear, from now on, after every race, my goal is to go walk 5 miles, and just walk, every few hours, because I feel that it really got rid of all the soreness, and I never was really laid up, to say.
I totally agree, Chris, because I know on some of my longer races, the races where I got a car and I drove home for, 2 or 3 hours or however long it might be, I really get, the muscles get stiff and you get tight. But the races that I've ran, there's been a couple marathons, a couple half marathons where as soon as the race was done, I went, there was one in particular where I went shopping with the family, and we walked around Target and some other places for a couple of hours afterwards. By the time I got home that evening, I felt great. I'm like, I ran a race today? How is that possible? I figured I'd be laid up. But the more, like you said, the more you walk after you get done running a race, your muscles relax. I think the recovery is a lot better. And it's just like when someone's had surgery, the quicker they get up and moving around, they recover quicker. Just like my wife did when she had our last son. It's like every pregnancy after, she got done with having the babies, it's like it was better each time. And so the recovery for me, when I've gotten around to where I'm moving around after the race and not just laying in a couch or a chair, man, I feel great the next day. And people are like, you went out and ran how far yesterday? And like, I went out and ran 44 miles yesterday or whatever it might be. And they're like, and you're still walking. And I'm like, yeah, because I was able to walk around and stay, limber. But
yeah, that's one of the comments I get, online a lot is, man, I'll do a 20-mile run and the rest of the day I'm shot. I'm on the couch and my husband or my wife is giving me a hard time. And honestly, I think because I try and keep my wife as happy as I can, and I get home from training, I take a shower and we're moving, that I just didn't really notice the effect until I recently did these races where I kind of had to do the same thing afterwards and walk and walk and walk. And yeah, from here on out, I think that's going to be my key, is just walking after running. Yeah. Yep. It's like, I just ran 100 miles. The last thing I want to do is walk 5 miles. But the reality is walking those 5 miles are going to be what makes all the difference in the world. So, well, let's get into how you got into trail running and kind of what you've accomplished there and then what you're working towards.
Sure. So, kind of like I mentioned earlier with Tulsa having a lot of urban wilderness, there's an area here in Tulsa called Turkey Mountain Urban Wilderness. I think I'm probably going to mess this up. I think it's like 440 acres. I don't remember what the actual square foot, the acreage is, but it's a very large area in Tulsa that's natural. There's lots of terrain, and as you've looked through some of my training stuff, I've trained out there quite a bit. There's nice hills and there's steep hills and there's some smaller ones. There's lots of trails. Some of them are marked and well marked, and then some are more of you have to kind of where you're going to get where you're needing to go. But it's a great area to go and run and to walk, and it's so busy out there, especially when the weather's nice on the more popular trails. And for those of us that are adventurous, we like to go in the areas that aren't the path less traveled, as you would say. And so that area is just full of just awesomeness. And so that's kind of where I got into, really started to enjoy the love of trails, is when this is the second time that I've lived in the Tulsa area. We lived in the Tulsa area when we first got married, and then we moved. And so that's, I would go out there and I'm like, man, I love running on trails. And of course, the love from cross country kind of poured out into that. And so I just really enjoyed running on the trails. I feel like, that's a great time when I can just reflect on things. The scenery changes. It's not boring by any means. I love nature. You can sometimes see wildlife or whatever it might be, but it's constant. It's, there might be a root here. There might be a stump there. There's rocks here. It's never dull. It's going to keep you on the top of literally on the tip of your toes the whole time you're running. But it's just like, you're part of something awesome rather than running on the pavement. And you know what the pavement's going to be. It's a beating, and it's over and over the same thing. And, so I really got to where I really enjoyed running on the trails and started running some of the trail races that they would have locally. And it's, I had a friend that just went out and ran on trails for the first time this last week. And he's like, I've never ran on trails before. I think that's pretty cool. I'm like, yeah, it's contagious. It's addictive.
Yeah, it's an eye opener when you take somebody for the first time that has never gone on trails per se, right? They may have done some hikes, but when you actually get them out there and they're running hills and the scenery's changing, it really opens their eyes. It's neat to see because they get that appreciation and that bug to want to be on trails more.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing, but it's also a very beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It's there's also a lot of stuff out there, as it's like you don't know when you're going to take that spill down the next hill, and so it's kind of that it keeps you on your toes. It's exciting. You don't know what's coming next, whereas when most cases when you're on the road, you pretty much know what's going to be coming down in front of you running on the pavement.
That's what I always tell marathoners or people running at work and things like that, trail running, I'll ask, do you trail run? And, no, I do all my running on the road. And I try and talk to them about those benefits of the fact that when I run on the road, you almost just go numb in a sense that, you just kind of mentally shut out, what you're doing per se, or, it's not really that exciting. But when you're on the trails, there is no time to drift off, because if you do, you're going to hit that rock, right? As you get tired and you're dragging your feet, you're going to stumble, and it just forces you to be in the moment so much more. And that's, I try and get that across to road runners that, it forces you to be in the moment.
It always keeps me humble, Chris, because it's like the last time I ran on a trail in a race 3 weeks ago, about the time you start to feel confident, it's when it gets you.
Yeah.
Because I had just been telling somebody, man, it's like, I'm having a good race. I haven't fallen today. And about that time, about 15, 20 seconds after that, I hit a rut and went sprawling. And I was like, I got a little confident there, and it kept me humble.
Yeah, exactly. It puts you right back in your place.
Yep, exactly.
So now you've been, from your Instagram, it looks like you have been doing some, when I followed, you are doing some trail running races, things like that. And you have done some ultras, whether it's 50Ks, 50 milers. And you did do a 100 miler, right? Was that last year?
No, it was last month, actually.
That was last month. Okay.
That was my first attempt.
All right.
Back in August, I've got a friend of mine that he's completed several 100 milers, and he's what I would call a good bad influence. He's a good guy, and he's a great runner and a good friend. And then it's like, others would call it a bad influence, but he's like, he looks at the potential in people and knows that they have the ability to do things. So he's trying to get the best to come out in you. And he's like, it's not that I'm trying to be a bad influence. I just see the potential in you, and you ought to go and try to run a 100 miler. And so he's been kind of hounding me for the last 3 years to do one. I'm like, I don't want to do 100 miles. I did 44. 3 years ago, I did 44, and I was like, there is no way I'm running that distance ever again. Once again, I said never. And I don't want to run further than 44 miles. I saw what that did to me, and I have no desire for that. And he's like, you just think about it. And so back in August, they announced a race in Southeast Oklahoma at Robbers Cave State Park. I hadn't ever been to that portion of the state. And it was one of those things. It was kind of like at the moment. And, as a runner, you sometimes do things that you don't normally do in the normal aspect of life, is you just kind of take and roll with it, right? And you just jump at the opportunity. It was an inaugural race, and they're like, we need people to sign up, and so I did, and I was the second person to sign up. So being the inaugural race, I got bib number 2. There's a friend of mine that got bib number 1. I was like, well, I'm going to jump in and get bib number 2. So I got bib number 2. And I was like, I just want to be a part of a race that's never been ran before. It's kind of a cool unknown. But as we, you sign up for it, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to run a 100 miler. I'm committed now. Well, yeah, I was committed, and I started doing all the training, and, I really started to ramp up the training from August into February. And we started seeing, pictures and stuff of what the course was going to be like. And I'll say this, that I bit off more than I could chew, literally. My wife's like, you go and sign up for 100 milers. She didn't want me to sign up for one anyways. She's like, I don't want you running 100 miles. Well, I went ahead and did it anyways. She's like, you didn't just sign up for a 100 miler. You signed up for one that was probably one of the hardest ones that anybody would ever even attempt. And I was like, well, that's just me, because I like a challenge. And I don't want to just go out and run, 100 miles on a straight road, because, that just is boring. And so I like the adventure. It was a trail. And not only that, a 100 miler on a trail. But so I get there, and as I'm driving there the night before, started getting a little nervous. So I'm driving, in Oklahoma is not extremely hilly, but there's some areas in Oklahoma that have some, has elevation. And Southeast Oklahoma, as it's getting close to the Arbuckle Mountains, and the Ozarks into Arkansas. There's hills. They might call them mountains, but not like what they would have in, parts of Utah or California or any place like that. But for us, it's not normally, it's not flat. And we get there and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to have to deal with this. And there's not going to be a lot of running because that course was so technical that it was basically it's hiking trail.
Right. Great for the ankles, right?
Yeah. There was a lady that ran or walked it with us that she made mention that she's like, every rock that God ever created, those rocks are here and those rocks had babies. So the rocks had babies and those babies had babies. And so there's rocks upon rocks. And so it was a majority of what we did was hiking. There was a little bit of running, a lot of hiking. And so I had the mileage logged in my body, but I did not have the preparation for the amount of elevation and the rocks and everything. So it wasn't like a traditional 100-miler that you would just go out and run. It was a lot of mental stuff. And so I went out there. It was a test. I know now kind of what to prepare for. I just went out to try to do what I needed to do. I have a lot of friends that run 100-milers, and they gave me their advice, and I took it up as much as I could and tried to apply it to my own race. I was on point for nutrition. I was on point for hydration. I was changing socks and shoes, and I had no blisters. I kept lubing up my feet, and I didn't have any of those issues. And every time I would hit a checkpoint, they're like, "How you feeling?" I said, "I feel great."
And was it a looped course?
Yeah. So the first loop was 13. It was a 13-mile loop, and then there was a smaller 7-mile loop. So then it gave you a 20-mile loop.
Yep.
And so the first loop, I get 20 miles in, and I was like, man, I'm feeling good. And I got that done in about 5 hours and like 50 minutes, something like that. And so it was faster than I anticipated. And then I grabbed my headlamp, and it's like, it's probably going to get dark before I get done with the second loop. Sure enough, about 2 miles before I got done with the second loop, it got dark and had to turn the headlamp on. But, I felt great through the first 40 miles, and then it got dark, and things change in the dark, as you would know. And, I think, Chris, probably the biggest challenge on that course, I've ran with headlamps before, but you had to have your head down to look to see where the rocks were. And then you had to look up to see where the markers were to go along the course. And that just got really tiring, and it just really wore on me.
I could see it being just mentally draining.
Oh, it was like, I was looking at my watch, and I'm like, okay, I've been out here, 20 hours. I'm like, I wanted to be done in, less than 30 hours. And I'm like, I'm not even anywhere halfway done, and I'm out here for 20 hours. And you start looking at your watch, and that's where I probably should have just put my watch away, seeing that I'm only averaging a mile and a half an hour. And I'm like, I'm only averaging a mile and a half to 2 miles in an hour period of time. And you start calculating, gosh, I'm not going to make the cutoff, and I'm not going to have enough time. And so then it started raining on us, and you're on trails with rocks and cliffs and crossing creeks. And I start stumbling around everywhere, and I step off in the creek and get my feet wet, and I start slipping on some of the rocks. I'm like, you know what? And it was so spread out that we were probably about 20, 25 minutes apart anywhere that anybody was on the course. If that limited at all. I mean, there might have been a bigger gap than that. And I'm like, there was I say no, but there was very little cell phone signal or coverage. So I have limited cell phone coverage. I'm in a very wooded area where there is wildlife, and we're spread out. I'm like, if I fall and crack my head on one of these rocks, I may not be found.
Yeah, who's going to find me, right?
And it was a week after that runner got attacked by the mountain lion, right? So that starts messing with you mentally.
Like looking around.
Yeah. And you start to hear stuff off in the leaves off from the trail you can't see, and you hear stuff. Then you hear the coyotes, and everything just starts messing with you in the dark. And I got to mile 47. I'd been out there for 21 hours, and I'm like, I'm going to get at least, they allowed us to complete. If you got 50 miles, you were eligible for a buckle. And I'm like, I'm going to get my 50 miles and I'm going to tap out respectively. So I got 55 in, and I respectively tapped out of that 100-miler.
Well, you gave some statistics in the email. Was there 13 runners? Is that what
there was 32 of us that started.
32.
Only 5 finished. Four men and 1 woman. And the original cutoff time was 36 hours. And the race director, I know him personally, he just wanted the race to be, successful. So he actually lifted the cutoff just so that he could have some people complete it, because no one had ever ran this. So he didn't really have an idea of, how long it would take somebody to complete the course.
Yeah,
and
wow,
so
that's rough.
The cutoff was 36 hours. And so he lifted that. And there was 2, the winning time, that runner, Marcus, he trains in that area. He finished it in 29 hours. And then the last runner that came through finished it in just under 40 hours. That's a long time to be out there.
Yeah, that becomes a multi-day.
Yeah, and I was like, there's no way physically, I don't think that I'm trained to come out here and be out here for 40 hours. And that's the part that really started looking, am I physically, I know that I can do the 100 miles, but am I physically and mentally capable of handling 40 hours out here by myself?
Yeah, so you didn't have any crew, anybody there to pace you or anything like that?
There was people out to pace, but, it was very limited, and I had no crew. And, it's because the aid stations and the loop was spread out just enough to where, if you needed something, within 7 to 10 miles, you've got something to help you. But yeah, it was tough. Yeah,
those 7 to 10 miles become very far when you're only moving 1.5 miles to 2 miles. So.
Exactly.
So then, are they changing the race at all? Do you know, or is it staying the same, or was it one of those things where you got home and you're like, I will never do that again, and somehow, some way, you signed up again?
There was actually people signing up for it before the weekend was over for next year.
Man.
They did change it. He actually added another 35 miles. So now they have a 135-mile option.
Wow.
I am probably not going to run that race next year. If I pick anything else, it'll probably be something a little less challenging. My elevation, just in the 55 miles that I ran, my elevation was over 6,000 feet of gain.
Yep. Yeah, I think for me, I wanted to run 100 miles, but I'm not a runner naturally. And so I wanted to test the distance to see, is this something that I want to do? I'd love to do a Zion or some other 100-mile race, but I wanted to know, one, can I get through it? And if I went and did one and I wasn't successful, would that destroy any chance that I would ever do it again or not? So yeah, I say I took the safe route in a sense that the course I'm doing is a looped course. So it's, it's a couple miles, which mentally is a whole different problem, right? When you're coming through every 2 miles, you got a lot of chances to quit. But I feel like I took the safe route in that sense that I wanted to introduce myself to it, but not, destroy my chances and kind of figure out, okay, I can do this. Now let's go find something a little more challenging, where you went for the big one.
Yeah. So the next one, the next attempt will be one that I plan on, completing. And so that's kind of my quest now is, I went out and tackled something that nobody had done yet. And, I was happy to get 55 miles in, and it's a learning experience. And so now I know what my limits are as far as, preparation and things like that. And so I'm looking at probably October of this upcoming 2019, the fall of 2019, to go out and complete my first 100-miler.
Nice. Have you selected the race yet, or are you still kind of trying to figure out what you're going to do?
I've kind of narrowed it down. There's 2. And so, it's like you start looking at time and calendar and all that with kids' activities and what's going on in life. And, my boys play soccer. And so that's something that I try to navigate around. And so there's 2 races. There's one here in Oklahoma. that's ran the middle of October, and it's got multiple distances. It's where I ran my first ultra, my first 50K. It's Pumpkin 100 Hollard, and it's up by Tahlequah, Oklahoma. And then there's another one, which is the Heartland Spirit up in Kansas, and it's in October. So those are two of the ones that I'm kind of eyeballing, just because of the time of the year. It's not going to be too cold. It's not most likely not going to be too hot. And I know that those courses, one's a looped course and the other's an out and back.
Okay.
And I know at least, it's kind of a rails to trails on the Heartland. And, I've ran the other one, so I know that I could do it.
Cool. Yeah, you'll have to look. I'm not 100% familiar, but last night someone contacted me on Instagram, the race director of something called the Monarch Ultra. And what it is they are basically promoting and trying, it's a conservancy. I don't know if that's the right term for it, but essentially it's bringing awareness to the monarch butterflies and the fact that they're disappearing, and there's a whole effort into that. And they've put together this run that runs from Mexico, or runs from Canada is where it starts. And basically it's the migration path of monarch butterflies from Canada down to Mexico, and reached out and asked, hey, would you be interested in running a leg? And what they're doing, I think it's 3,400 kilometers, and they've broken it up into 50K to, I think it's 50K segments, all the way from Canada to Mexico. And people are registering to run these sections, and there's a day that they're doing it, and they're filming the whole thing and creating a documentary and all of this. But for me, at first I said, oh, perfect. It's got to be near California, right? But it's not at all. I had no idea where monarchs migrate from. I was just interested because my daughter goes to the local middle school, and their mascot is the monarch butterfly. So I'm like, oh, perfect. But I started looking, and it runs from Mexico through Texas, up through Texas, and it makes its way all the way through Ohio and kind of that direction up to, basically up through Ohio and then into Canada. So I don't know where that course aligns to where you're at, but I'll have to send you the link, because if I was anywhere near it, I think it would be really cool to run a leg of that, even if it, a 50K leg, and be part of something like that.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, I'll shoot you the link. I don't know where it runs, if it's anywhere near you, but might be something it's a training run.
Absolutely. Yeah, bonus mileage.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Anthony. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and the highs and lows and the experiences you have. It's been great. I
appreciate the time, Chris. It's been an honor.
Yeah. Well, one thing I didn't get to ask you is, in your preparation for that 100, kind of what was your training schedule like? Did you use a training plan? And then what was your longest run for the 100?
Oh, sure. So I have a couple different friends that have a couple of different training plans that they sent me that they've kind of, developed. And I took two of them and kind of collaborated the two together to make kind of a hybrid plan. I tried to follow one of them as close to as possible, kind of to fit it to my schedule and my liking. The other one was a little bit more of an advanced 100-mile training plan. And so the one that I looked that was closer was more of a novice, getting you into the idea of running those longer distances. The longest run that I did was actually, so it was kind of unique how I did the training plan is about the times when I needed those really long runs is there was some races in the area on those weekends. And what better way to get that training mileage in to go and run a race and have that support with the race. And so I did, there was a marathon I did in December, and then I did my 50K the middle of January, and then did the 55K 2 weeks later. And so the 55K was the longest training run that I did. And that was, a little less than a month away from that first 100-mile attempt. So,
okay.
So I did a 50 and a 55K within a month of my first attempt. So yeah, that was roughly 36 miles was the longest that I went out and ran.
Okay. And how many days a week on average are you running?
I usually will run 4 days a week. Okay. My body starts to break down if I'm running 7 days a week. I try to
the schedule that I had a rest day on Monday, a rest day on Wednesday, and a rest day on Friday. So basically it was a rest day right before the really long runs on the weekend, and then a rest day on that following Monday after the long runs. Very cool.
Yeah, that's one thing I've been working towards is increasing my volume. Not necessarily running, shooting to try and run lots of miles per week. I'm probably averaging 50 at this point, but it's been, and that's something the coach I'm working with has been pushing, is adding that extra day, right? Shortening the total mileage of any one run, but then running more. And that was my issue, is breaking down. But over time, shortening those, I feel like it has helped quite a bit, getting in more runs. The downside of that is I'm doing less weightlifting and other things. So it's going to be trying to find that balance for me, where I'm getting the cross training in I want and not just running. So I think that balance is always hard.
Absolutely.
Well, where can folks find you? I know you're on Instagram, and I think you started a blog, which is very cool. And you recently have been putting some videos up online, which it's so funny because when you emailed me last night, you had emailed me a question, and I was in the mode of getting ready for this race, and I completely forgot about getting with you. So I will get back with you on doing these thumbnails. Now that I realize it, I did not respond, but we'll get that figured out here. But where can folks find you?
Good. So yeah, you kind of actually kind of inspired me to, I've written before, but I was like, I'm going to try the video blog thing and see how it goes. And so I'm on Instagram, Scarecrow Runner.
Yeah, where's that come from?
Yeah, so I was wondering if you're going to ask me that. So being from Kansas, with the Wizard of Oz and the whole Scarecrow, my parents kind of nicknamed all of his kids. One of the, my brother's the Tan, my sister's Dorothy, and I'm the Scarecrow. And so it's kind of that moniker. Being from Kansas and I'm a runner, I was like, I'll just call myself the Scarecrow Runner, and it's kind of stuck since then. And so I'm on Instagram and YouTube as Scarecrow Runner. So I've started a video documentary, much like yours, Chris. It's called 30 Strong, and I'm going to be videoing, documenting, just like you are, the joys and the pains of everything associated with my training for my 100-miler.
Very cool. And then, Scarecrow. I'll link it all, but Scarecrow Runner, Instagram and YouTube. And then you also have a blog that I'll put in there. I think that was scarecrowrunner.blogspot.com, I think.
Yep. Yeah.
Perfect. So I'll link all those so people can connect with you. And it's really neat to get to talk to people that are doing the same thing. They're dealing with the same balances. It's funny, and as you start documenting your stuff, what you'll find, depending on how you go about it. I tried to create something that showed the balance of life, right? That I felt like nobody really wants to see me run. That's kind of boring. Maybe they watch one of them, but how many videos are they really going to watch of me running, right? It gets, I don't even want to watch videos of people running. But trying to mix in the insights and the pain and the family, and not wanting to put my family online a lot, but trying to mix that in enough so that people can see what's happening. And it's funny because folks like yourself, every once in a while I'll get an email from somebody and say, it all looks great, but how come I never see any video of your kid throwing a fit? And
exactly.
And I always tell them, as much as that is the reality, I say they have plenty of time in their lives to make themselves look dumb online. I try and minimize it at this point.
Not at my cost.
Exactly. So, well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and it's been fun following you, and I look forward to following your journey online and seeing you knock out that first 100.
Well, I appreciate it, Chris, and I look forward to watching you knock out yours coming up here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's fun to be this close. It's funny because we're already talking about what's going to be next, and what will be the next 100. Which I hate to count my chickens before they hatch, but
just enjoy your taper.
Oh my God, I've been embracing it. This week has been only some walking, and coming this weekend, which tomorrow, I'll start doing some running again. But it was nice to actually, although I've been sick, so I haven't been running that much actually, which might have been what worked out really great. It was a forced taper. Well,
Awesome.
Great. Well, thanks again. I appreciate it. And thanks everyone for tuning in. If you're enjoying it, if you're on Facebook, if you're on YouTube, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to get notifications as to when we're doing more of these. And if you're listening to this on one of the podcast applications like iTunes or Google or Spotify, anything like that, and you're enjoying it, get a chance, give it a review, leave a comment, give it some stars, anything like that helps with us finding it. And again, just a quick shout out to my Patreon supporters. I really appreciate all the support and all of your comments, and all the folks that leave comments online on YouTube. Appreciate all of that. And we will talk to you in just a few days.
Out, trail run.